Welcome everyone to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham and we're live in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, here's a look at the latest headlines. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will visit China to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit later this month, as New Delhi and Beijing seek to restore dialogue and stability in diplomatic relations. South Korea says it will offer visa-free entry to tourist groups from China for a temporary period from September 29 through June of next year, as it looks to boost foreign tourism ahead of the Asia-Pacific summit. U.S. tariffs of 50% on many Brazilian products take effect as President Donald Trump moves ahead with a pressure campaign against the trial of his right-wing Brazilian ally, Jair Bolsonaro. Official data shows German industrial orders unexpectedly fell in June as Europe's biggest economy struggles with prolonged domestic weakness and volatile U.S. trade policy. And a UK charity watchdog clears Prince Harry of bullying allegations in a public spat at his African charity Centabel, which criticizes all parties for allowing the damaging internal dispute to play out in public. We begin in the Middle East, where calls continue to grow for Hezbollah to disarm. In a televised speech on Tuesday, Naim Qassem said his group will not accept any timetable on handing over its weapons to the Lebanese state while Israeli strikes continue.
With regards to Lebanon, any timetable presented for implementation under the shadow of Israeli aggression cannot be agreed to. The state must develop plans to confront pressure and threats and ensure protection, rather than deprive its citizens of their capabilities and strength, and deprive its resistance of its capabilities and strength.
The comments came as Lebanon's cabinet, chaired by President Joseph Aoun and Prime Minister Nawaf Salam, met for nearly 6 hours at the presidential palace in Bada. The cabinet instructed the Lebanese army to present an executive plan to ensure that all weapons in the country are brought under state control by the end of the year.
Authorizing the Lebanese army with setting an executive plan to confine arms before the end of this current year in the hands of the forces outlined in the announcement special arrangements of the cessation of hostilities and submitting it to the cabinet of ministers before the 31st of this month for it to be discussed and decided.
But before the cabinet meeting ended, two ministers allied with Hezbollah walked out of the session in what appeared to be a show of opposition to the decision. Hezbollah's leaders reacted swiftly, saying disarmament cannot be enforced through unilateral decisions and must come through national consensus.
Resistance to confront Israel is a matter related to Lebanon's charter that is discussed by consensus. Come, let us discuss a national security strategy and a defense strategy. National security goes beyond the issue of weapons because it takes into account Lebanon's strength, the accumulation of strength, the gathering of strength, the attempt to defend and confront the Israeli enemy. The strategy is not a timeline to disarm.
Now, the government's move came as Beirut is under immense U.S. pressure to disarm the group that fought a 14-month war with Israel and was left gravely weakened, with many of its political and military leaders dead. Washington and Beirut have been in talks since June on a U.S. roadmap to fully disarm Hezbollah in exchange for a halt to Israeli strikes, the withdrawal of Israeli troops still occupying 5 points in South Lebanon, and funds to rebuild areas destroyed by Israeli bombardment during the war. Now, since the Israeli-Hezbollah war ended in November of last year with the U.S. brokered ceasefire, Hezbollah officials have said the group will not discuss its disarmament until Israel withdraws. Meanwhile, Israel has accused Hezbollah of trying to rebuild its military capabilities, and Hezbollah, the only faction that kept its weapons after Lebanon's 1975 to 1990 civil war, has claimed responsibility for one attack on a disputed area along the border since the ceasefire, which is said was in response to an Israeli incursion. Now, during the cabinet meeting, the Hezbollah chief once again warned that any renewed broad offensive from Israel would be met with force.
It is in Israel's interest not to resort to a broad aggression, because if they resort to a broad aggression, the resistance will defend and the army will defend and the people will defend. This defense will lead to rockets falling inside the Israeli entity.
The Lebanese army has just weeks to submit its plan on maintaining the state's monopoly on arms, and the choices made in Beirut in the weeks ahead may echo far beyond Lebanon's borders. Whether this moment marks a turning point or just a pause in a deeper conflict, however, remains to be seen. And now to Moscow, where President Donald Trump's trusted foreign envoy Steve Witkoff has met Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin. The high-stakes meeting comes just before President Donald Trump's Friday deadline to impose fresh sanctions on Russia's offensive in Ukraine. The environment in Moscow will be far different than the last time Witkoff sat down with Putin in April, with President Trump's frustration towards his Russian counterpart mounting in recent months. And since Witkoff's last meeting with Putin, Russia has continued its assault on Ukrainian cities and increased the use of drones and missile strikes, including on the capital of Kyiv. President Trump, once open to diplomatic possibilities with Moscow, has now grown increasingly skeptical and frustrated, describing Russia's recent air attacks as disgusting and accusing Putin of offering empty promises. The day before Witkoff's visit, Trump confirmed he would withhold any decision on new sanctions until after Witkoff's meeting in Russia conclude.
We'll see what happens. Yep. You know, they have a meeting tomorrow. We have a meeting with Russia tomorrow. We're going to see what happens. We'll make that determination at that time.
Now, on the same day, President Trump also spoke to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and the Ukrainian president stated that potential sanctions by the U.S. could significantly impact Russia's economy and confirmed they discussed expanding military support for Ukraine, a plan greenlit by President Trump last month and funded by NATO allies. After Witkoff's arrival in Moscow, Zelensky urged U.S. pressure on Russia, adding that it's important to strengthen all levers in the arsenal of the U.S., Europe, and the G7 so that a ceasefire does come into effect.
It is very important to strengthen all the levers in the arsenal of the United States, Europe, and the G7 so that a ceasefire truly comes into effect immediately. Ukraine sees the political will, appreciates the efforts of our partners, of America, and of everyone who is helping.
Putin, meanwhile, has shown no signs of softening his position as he continues to demand control over 4 Ukrainian regions and insists that Kyiv must limit the size of its military and drop its NATO ambitions. But President Trump is not ready to back down. He recently ordered the repositioning of 2 U.S. nuclear submarines, citing the need to be prepared following a fiery debate with former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. Now, he didn't specify where these submarines will be positioned, only indicating that they will be placed closer to Russia. And though Trump remains firm on his position, he's also cast doubt if any new sanctions will prove effective after Moscow found ways to skirt Western measures already applied since the war began.
There'll be sanctions, but they seem to be pretty good at avoiding sanctions. You know, they're wily characters, and they're pretty good at avoiding sanctions. So we'll see what happens.
The president has also warned of secondary tariffs on countries that continue to import Russian energy, such as India and China. And now another layer has been added to the standoff. In the latest escalation, Russia has officially withdrawn from the 1987 Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, giving Moscow legal grounds to deploy nuclear weapons that were previously restricted. The standoff between Putin and Trump grows more precarious by the day, and as the Friday deadline draws near, neither leader appears to be seeking an exit ramp. And here in Washington, the political temperature is heating up again over the shadow legacy of Jeffrey Epstein. Former U.S. President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton are among several high-profile figures who've been subpoenaed by the House Oversight Committee as part of a widening investigation into the federal handling of the Epstein case. Led by Republican Chairman James Comer, the committee is demanding testimony and documents from the Clintons and 8 other key figures, including former attorneys generals and FBI directors, about their possible links to Epstein and how the Justice Department managed the years-long probe into his sex trafficking operation. The subpoenas, which were even issued as Congress heads into its summer recess, signal an escalation. Bill Clinton is scheduled for a deposition on October 14th, while Hillary Clinton's is expected on October 9th. Also summoned are former Attorneys General Merrick Garland, Loretta Lynch, Eric Holder, Jeff Sessions, Bill Barr, and Alberto Gonzales, as well as former FBI Directors James Comey and Robert Mueller. All were asked to provide sworn testimony between August and mid-October. Now the Clintons' connections to Epstein dates back to the early 2000s. Bill Clinton has so far acknowledged taking 4 trips on Epstein's private jet in 2003 and 2002, accompanied by staff and Secret Service agents. In fact, he also met Epstein in New York and once visited his apartment. However, Clinton's spokesperson has long insisted the former president knew nothing about Epstein's crimes and cut ties well before the financier's arrest.
He's not spoken to Epstein in well over a decade and has never been to Little St. James Island, Epstein's ranch in New Mexico, or his residence in Florida. President Clinton knows nothing about the terrible crimes Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty to in Florida some years ago, or those with which he has been recently charged in New York.
Now, despite the Justice Department's recent statement denying the existence of a so-called incriminating client list, public pressure continues to mount.
Well, I haven't been overly interested in it. You know, it's a hoax that's been built up way beyond proportion. They ran the files. I was running against somebody that ran the files. If they had something, they would have released. Now, they can easily put something in the files that's a phony.
Now, a memo released last month confirmed Epstein's 2019 jail death was in fact a suicide and claimed no further major disclosures would be made, prompting fury from both Trump supporters and some Democrats.
Jeffrey Epstein was a friend of Donald Trump. Jeffrey Epstein was arrested during the Trump administration. Jeffrey Epstein was detained during the Trump administration. Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide during the Trump administration. Donald Trump is running scared. And the Trump administration is running scared. What are they hiding from the American people? Release the files so that the American people can make a decision on their own.
The Oversight Committee is now demanding all relevant documents and communications from the Justice Department related to Epstein and his convicted accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, Maxwell is currently serving a 20-year sentence and has agreed to testify before the committee under legal protections, but her deposition, which was initially scheduled for August 11, has been postponed due to her pending appeal before the Supreme Court. Maxwell's lawyers are opposing the release of grand jury records, arguing it will violate her legal rights. In fact, several reports even suggest Maxwell may have privately named names during a recent meeting with justice officials. And now whether those details see the light of day remains to be seen. But what is clear, the testimony of high-profile figures such as the Clintons ensure this political drama continues to deliver twists and turns. For decades, space was the domain of science fiction or the occasional moonshot. It was defined by moments, a flag planted, a rover landing, a satellite launched. But today, that vision has shifted. Governments are making strategic calculations, and space is no longer just about orbital satellites or exploration. It's now turning into a race for long-term influence, and at the heart of that race stands a nuclear reactor, not in a lab, not in Earth's orbit, but on the surface of the moon. Whoever gets there first could shape what happens next. Here's more on the emerging space race.
The next great space race isn't about planting flags or exploring the unseen side of the universe anymore. It's about powering the future. And the United States is moving fast. It wants to put a nuclear reactor on the moon, and it wants to do it by 2030. A new directive from NASA confirms that the agency will accelerate plans to deploy a 100-kilowatt reactor on the lunar surface. The plan is being led by Sean Diffie, the U.S. Transportation Secretary, who's also serving as NASA's acting administrator.
There's a certain part of the moon that everyone knows is the best. We have ice there, we We have sunlight there. We want to get there first and claim that for America.
But why the urgency? Because Russia and China had their eyes on the same prize. Moscow and Beijing are reportedly aiming to deploy their own reactor to the moon by the mid-2030s to power a joint base. NASA officials fear that whoever installs the first moon reactor could likely claim strategic lunar real estate, possibly creating keep-out zones around vital resources like ice and minerals.
This technology is critically important. And I would just note that we're behind, right? If we're going to engage in the race to the moon and the race to Mars, we have to get our act together. We have to marshal all of our resources, all of our focus on going to the moon, which is what we're going to do. This is critically important.
In such a scenario, this mission is about more than technology. It's about geopolitical leadership and securing access to the moon's most valuable regions. For this, NASA's plan reportedly requires the appointment of a nuclear power czar who can select 2 commercial partners within 6 months to develop the critical nuclear power system. The system must generate at least 100 kilowatts of power, enough to run life support, communications and mining equipment for a sustained human presence on the moon. But why go nuclear when there is solar power? For the simple reason that solar panels cannot withstand the moon's 2-week dark nights, but a nuclear reactor will provide 24/7 power, keeping life support, habitats and science operations running without interruption. In fact, NASA plans to deploy the reactor on a heavy-class lander with a payload capacity of 15 metric tons. The launch target, late 2029.
So this is not a new concept. This has been discussed under Trump 1, under Biden, but we are in the race. We're in a race to the moon, in a race with China to the moon, and to have a base on the moon, we need energy.
Yet challenges remain. The Trump administration has proposed major budget cuts to NASA, including a 24% reduction in 2026. But the bigger issue is making sure humans and hardware can actually get to the moon. NASA's Artemis 3 mission, its first crewed lunar landing, has been delayed to 2027. China, by comparison, is targeting 2030 for its first crewed mission. Despite this, the United States is moving forward to turn its vision into reality. So the next few years won't just decide who gets to the moon, but also who builds the first long-term foothold beyond Earth. This new space race isn't just to land, it's to stay. And the first to power up may define the rules for decades to come.
As Hoberg and Rubio assist the crew.
And today we end in the world of fashion, where 2 Zara ads pulled and banned in the UK for featuring models who appear unhealthily thin. The UK's ad watchdog called the images irresponsible and ruled they must not appear again. Zara has removed all flagged images and clarified that the models were fit and in good health. The ads have reignited questions about how far fashion has come on the promise of inclusivity. Our final story has the latest.
Remember when fashion promised to change to celebrate all body types and not just size 0? They called it Body Positivity Revolution. Curves were in, plus-size models walked the runway, and inclusivity made headlines. But something has shifted now, quietly and subtly. Fashion brand Zara has come to the spotlight. 2 of its ads just got banned in the UK. Why? Because the models look too thin, unhealthily thin. The UK's Advertising Standards Authority, or ASA, said one model looked gaunt, with shadows and a slick back bun emphasising her thinness. In another ad, the pose and low-cut shirt design highlighted protruding collarbones. The ASA ruled that both adverts are irresponsible. They said Zara must ensure future images are prepared responsibly. The now banned ads appeared on Zara's app and website as part of a carousel displaying clothes and models. One ad was for a short dress. According to the ASA, the shadows made the model's legs look noticeably thin, and the positioning of her arms made her look out of proportion. The other ad featured an oversized shirt. The model's pose made her collarbones a focal point, which the ASA flagged as a concern. Now, Zara has pulled down the images. The brand stated that both models are healthy and have medical certificates. They added that the photos were only edited with minor lighting and color adjustments. Zara also cited compliance with the Fashioning a Healthy Future report, a 2007 UK model health inquiry, specifically a recommendation that models provide proof of good health from doctors trained to detect eating disorders. This isn't a one-off case. In July, the ASA banned a Marks & Spencer ad after 4 complaints. The model wore large pointed shoes with slim trousers. The image, clearly showing defined collarbones. Marks & Spencer said the models were size 8, healthy, and chosen for their professionalism. In February, another ban hit clothing brand, Next. The ASA said the model looked unhealthily thin. Next disagreed, saying the model was slim but healthy, and the pose in question was meant to show how the leggings fit on bent legs. Social media users questioned the ruling, asking why overweight models are accepted, but slim ones are sometimes banned. In 2023, Warehouse, another clothing brand, had an ad pulled. The model's collarbones, hip bones, and torso were considered too prominent. These bans come amid growing concerns about mental health and unrealistic body standards in advertisements. Zara removed the ads, and so did the other fashion brands. But this doesn't end the debate. Is thin back in fashion, or is the fashion industry quietly rewinding progress? As fashion continues to walk the tightrope between body positivity and beauty standards, this ban adds another thread to the debate over what should be considered runway ready.
That's all we have time for today. We certainly thank all of you for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks everyone for watching.